Hello. Okay, so to draft our sleeve, we are going to need our book, page 56 to 59. You're going to want your L-square ruler. You're going to want, do we need this? Yes, we do. We're going to need our hip curve ruler. We are going to want our French curve, our clear gridded ruler, pair of scissors, and you should be using a pencil. I am going to be using a Sharpie so that it comes through on the camera, okay? You're also going to need your front and back bodices that we just drafted, okay? So, oh yeah, and a piece of paper, piece of soft pattern paper that is about 18 inches wide. Like I said in the intro, the first step is measuring your armholes, okay? There's a few different ways you can do it. Go ahead and do that on your own. Record your measurements on page 56 in your book. What you're gonna do next is very similar to what we did on our bodices. You're gonna take your sleeve draft, and there's not very much, there are only about 3 measurements to input. So on our sleeve length, we're gonna use this sleeve measurement chart right here at the bottom of page 56 for size 10, okay? The sleeve length we're gonna utilize is 22 inches, so fill in that blank. The cap height we are gonna utilize is 5 3/4, so fill that in. And then down here for the armhole measurement, we're gonna use what we just got, okay? So fill that in, and then let's get to drafting. Now, I want to start by saying there are a few things I'm going to change up in this book, or in this draft from the book. The first thing is on page 56, when it talks about sleeve cap ease, it talks about there being like 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches of sleeve cap ease. I find this to be, and I find parts of this book, this textbook in general, to be a bit outdated, and this area is one of them. Sleeve cap ease, if you were to have 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches of sleeve cap ease, that's the amount that you would have to ease in along your sleeve cap when you set it into your bodice, without puckers or without pleats or without tucks. That is very hard, especially because most of us are beginner sewers in this course. And so I'm gonna go against the book, and I'm going to recommend that you try to have around 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch of sleeve cap ease when you're done drafting this sleeve. Now that means that your sleeve cap is going to measure 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch longer in measurement than your armhole curves added together, okay? It'll make it much easier to sew. Modern day garments often don't have much of any ease built into the sleeve cap. And so that's kind of my reasoning for changing the book's drafting method. So just make a note of that, okay? All right, let's get to drafting. All right, we are going to start by drawing a line down sort of the center of our paper, okay? I'm gonna use my L-square ruler because this edge of it is 24 inches long, and I only need my first measurement to be 22 inches long. So I'm gonna start middle of the road here. I'm just gonna use my L-square, firmly hold it down. Just give myself a nice long line down the center of the paper. Over here by my right hand, I'm gonna label this A. I am going to utilize my clear gridded ruler, and remember, you have to get your head up on top of your ruler, and so if you ever see my head, hello, in the camera, that should trigger you that like, whoa, I need to be getting myself up on top of my ruler so I'm getting accurate measurements, okay? So get up on top of your ruler. line up one of these small lines on your clear gridded ruler with this line you just created. Make sure you're really lined up. I'm gonna give myself a guideline across. Okay, so this intersection right here is actually A. This is over by my right hand. Now I'm going to utilize this ruler. I'm gonna measure from this intersection all the way down my line to the left, 22 inches. This is our sleeve length. And I am going to label this B. And I'm gonna do the same thing over here where I square a line out. In either direction, okay? So we have our center line, A by our right hand, B by our left hand, and we've squared lines out in either direction. Okay, now back up here at A, I wanna measure to the left. This is our sleeve cap height. I wanna measure 5 3/4 from A. So 5 3/4, give myself a line. I'm gonna label this C. And again, I am going to square a line out in either direction. Now you could utilize your L square ruler, line up one edge of it with the center line, and square a line out here and flip it over and square a line out there. But I know that I'm really good at being accurate with this one, and so I'm just gonna utilize this one. Okay, so we should have, from the right going left, we should have A, C, and B. And lines squared out from either of them. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do is we are going to find the middle point between B and C, okay? The way that I'm going to do this is I'm gonna measure it. You can utilize my little strip of paper trick where you get a strip of paper and fold it in half to find the center point. I am gonna try to just measure it. All right, so I have 16 1/4, which means that half of that would be 8 1/8. So I'm gonna make a little cross mark at 8 1/8. This is going to be labeled D. Now, from D, we are going to measure towards C 3 3/4 of an inch, okay? So from D, you wanna go to the right 3/4 of an inch. You can label this D1, or this is our new D, and cross out this other D, okay? So the actual D measurement that we are gonna be using, this will be our elbow line. It's the halfway point between C and B, and then you go 3/4 of an inch towards the elbow, or towards the bicep, sorry. Then we are going to square a line out from this new D. All right, here's what I want you to do now. I want you to check that you did your squaring accurately by pinching and creasing along this first line that you made that goes down the center of the paper. Make sure you don't see your line on either side, but that you actually see it right on the crease, okay? Make sure you got your whole paper creased really nicely. And you can use your awl and come out and poke a hole, kind of a little ways out on each line, so that you make sure that the lines are resting on top of one another. That means they are very perfectly squared from this center line. Yay, okay, I'm really happy with my squaring. If you got any, if your all point, like you poked a hole through the line here and your all point came out kind of like over here or something, you should probably redo that line, and now is a good time to redo it, okay? So everybody go make sure their lines are squared and then meet me back here in a second. So once we know our lines are squared, we are going to label them, okay? So this is gonna be the top of our sleeve cap. This C line is going to be our bicep line. This D line is going to be our elbow. And this will be our wrist. Now, our next step is going to be, our armhole measurement is 8.5 inches. So we're gonna set 8.5 right here at this intersection near A. We're gonna use that as our pivot point, and we are going to pivot our ruler until the 0 hits somewhere along this bicep line. Hold your ruler down and give yourself a line. And also mark right where it intersects the bicep line. And you're gonna do the same thing on the other side of A. So line up 8.5, pivot. Boom, right there. Okay, so it should be 8.5 inches from A here, 8.5 inches from A here. We kind of got this. Now, the next step in our book, we are not going to do that step, okay? So I want you to cut a little strip of paper. I want you to take this straight edge of it and put it down on this line here. Mark where this intersection is. Measure all along until you get to A. Okay? Now make sure the two sides are really, really similar. Perfect. Now we are going to fold this in half, bring those two marks together. Fold it in half and crease it. And then you're gonna bring that crease up to your marks again and fold it in half again. Okay? So when you unfold it, you should have 1, 2, 3 creases, all right? Line it up and give yourself little tick marks where each of those creases lies. Okay? And you're gonna do that on both sides, okay? So essentially what we're doing is we're dividing each of these into fourths, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4 equal segments. Now I want you to start furthest away from you on the bicep line, and each of these little tick marks, we're going to give them a label. This first tick mark here is G, second is H, and the third is K. Then we come to A, and then coming down from A, we have L, M, and N. All right, so next step, I want you to measure from C out to one of these tick marks. And then the other, I am getting 6 1/4 for each of them. So what I want you to do is come down here to B, and we want to measure out on either side of B 2 inches less than we have on either side of our bicep line. So you're going to measure 4 1/4 from B on either side. We're going to label these O and P. Now we are going to connect the outer edge of our bicep line to the outer edge of our wrist line. On both sides, okay? So we're gonna kind of create the shaping for our sleeve cap, all right? It's very much like a bell curve almost, and it's not quite symmetrical from the front to the back. So we're gonna take each of these points that we made along our diagonals, and I'm gonna tell you a measurement, and I'm gonna tell you whether it goes in or out, okay? And I want you to make note of that. And what that means is in means in towards the sleeve, out means out away from the sleeve. There are a few measurements that I'm changing from the book draft, so please take note of what I'm telling you, all right? And it's gonna be these 2 lower measurements here. I'm gonna change those slightly just because, again, we are trying to get less ease in our sleeve cap than this book draft calls for, and so this is how I'm doing it. Okay, so at G, I want you to come in 1/4 inch. At H, I want you to go out 1/4 inch. At K, I want you to go out 5/8 of an inch. At L, I want you to go out 3/4 of an inch. M, I want you to go out 3/16 of an inch. And N, I want you to go in 3/8 of an inch. So this is exactly what the book suggests, except for G and N, I lessened those by 1/8 of an inch each. And that's just so we can get slightly less ease in our sleeve cap, okay? So the next step that you're gonna do is you are going to look at each of these and you are going to square a line off of these diagonals, either in or out the measurement that we've recorded, okay? And the easiest way to do that is I'm gonna start by just squaring a line. I know I'm coming in, so what I'm doing is lining up one of these lines on my ruler with my diagonal, making sure it's really aligned, and I'm coming in 1, 2, 3/8 of an inch. I can draw my line further, and then I'm just gonna give myself a tick mark so I know exactly where that intersection is, okay? 1, 2, 3/8. Boom. Makes sense? Coming in, squaring a line in, and then I'm giving myself a tick mark for my 3/8, right? Here, I'm going to square a line out, 3/16. Again, get your head right down on top of it so you're getting really accurate measurements. Okay, and I want you to go through and do that. Make a note of whether you're squaring out or in, and then what your measurement is, okay? So go and do the rest of those. So these two are the only ones going in, the rest of them go out. Now, if you look at page 58 of your textbook, it's gonna show you a really great illustration of how we are going to get our sleeve cap drafted. And I only have one French curve, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to align it on my sleeve cap and kind of get this first lower curve built in. And then what you have to do is flip it over, and then you can get this second part of the curve done. Do the same thing for the other side of the armhole where you align it like this and get this first upper part of the curve in, then flip it, and get the lower part of the curve done, okay? So ultimately what we're trying to do is with this first part of the curve, we're trying to connect this intersection, and this one. So play around with your French curve until it kind of hits all three, okay? Draw that in, okay? And I'm gonna flip it and flip it. And now I'm connecting, again, this middle point to here and then up to A. Okay, so do you see this beautiful curve kind of developing here? So we're gonna do the same thing on this side, connect A, L, and M. Flip and flip, whoops. So have the flat part kind of overlapping where you already did your curve, and you're gonna connect this lower corner with N to M, okay? All right, we've got our sleeve cap shaped. What you can do is, I'm gonna have to take white out, but you can erase kind of these straight diagonal lines just to make it a little bit easier for you to see what's going on. All right, you'll notice that there are differences between the two sides. They're not totally symmetrical. So the side of the sleeve that's closest to us, I want you to label it front. And this side furthest away, I want you to label it back. All right, so over here closest to us, this is our underarm seam. The underarm seam closest to us at the elbow level, we're gonna label this S. We're gonna go across from us along the elbow line, we're gonna extend this out 1/4 of an inch out. And label that R. I want you to connect R up to this corner. You can erase this line right now. We're no longer going to need that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the middle ground between R and this intersection right here. I am going to do that by utilizing my strip of paper method. Make sure you're using, I cut this off and you see my cut line is not very straight or smooth. So I'm using the straight edge of the paper. So I line up one edge with R, the other with this intersection. And I fold it in half and crease it to find my middle ground. And I want you to give yourself a tick mark right here. So this tick mark should be halfway between R and D. And you can check yourself. So this mark right here, we're gonna label it T, okay? What we're developing over here is a dart for our elbow, because when you look at someone from a profile view, you'll notice that their arm does not hang like straight down. It kind of like angles forward a little bit. And so this dart kind of helps create some shaping for that angled part of the lower arm, okay? So we are going to measure R, we're gonna measure 1 inch below it and give ourselves a mark. I'm just kind of creating a little guideline here, 1 inch below R. So what I want to measure next is I want to figure out this exact measurement from R to T. I have 2 13/16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my awl to create a pivot point on my ruler right at T. And I'm going to pivot this over until the end of my ruler hits somewhere along this guideline that I just made below R, okay? Now what that does is this is our elbow dart, right? So we took this measurement and we replicated that exact measurement over here. So we know that when we fold our dart together, that our dart legs will be the same length, okay? So T is now our dart point, R and U are the ends of our dart legs. Okay. Now I want you to come down here to O. So O is kind of along the wrist level. I want you to measure from O 3/4 of an inch towards yourself, towards you. Give yourself a little tick mark. That is going to be called V. What we need to do next is we need to figure out what we're trying to do is, since we added this dart here, we kind of need to shift the whole bottom section of this sleeve to kind of angle out so that once we fold our dart, it's not gonna hike up the back of that sleeve, okay? So I need to find the measurement from our elbow to our wrist on this part of the underarm seam. So find that measurement. I am getting exactly 9 inches. So what we need to do is come over here at U. put our ruler, put the 9-inch mark on our ruler right at U. And I want to pivot so our ruler is going through V and it's gonna go a little bit past it, okay? So again, our 9-inch mark is right here at U. We're gonna measure through V, a little bit past it, and make a line. And the new end of our underarm seam over here is going to be labeled W, okay? Now what we can do is erase this line. That will no longer be our side seam, it's going to be this angled one, our underarm seam, I mean. All right, so the next thing we need to do, before you erase this line actually, you need to take your measurement O to P. It should be 8.5, okay? Because earlier when we measured these, we did 4 1/4 here, 4 1/4 here. So your O to P should be 8.5. What I want you to do is zero your ruler out at W and create a little pivot point right there at the end and pivot your ruler until 8.5 hits somewhere along this wrist line over here, okay? And then draw your new wrist level. This corner over here is going to be labeled X. And I want you to erase this original wrist line. So do you see how we're kind of just shifting this whole lower part of the sleeve? So now the only thing we have left to do is connect S to X. And the way that we're gonna do it is I'm gonna use my hip stick and I want a very slightly curved line, like very slightly curved. So I'm gonna get the really straight part of my ruler here, down here at X. And I just want it to slightly curve up into S, okay? Beautiful. Now you can erase this original line and our solid line is our new sleeve draft, okay? You have officially drafted your sleeve. There are some final touches we need to make, obviously, like adding notches and walking our piece so it will sew together well. So meet me back here and we will do that all together. All right, now that we've got our sleeve drafted, I'm gonna go and just kind of trim a little of the excess off around the edges. All right, that's just to make it a little bit more manageable while we walk it. So essentially what we have to do is we're gonna walk our sleeve. When this gets sewn together, when you sew your sleeve, the first step you're gonna do is you're gonna sew your dart, okay? So we are going to start by folding our dart and finding this dart intake shaping here, all right? So just the default rule for darts is horizontal darts, the intake gets folded downward. So what we're gonna do is we are going to find the lowest dart leg that is the furthest downward, and we are going to crease along that dart leg. And I just crease all along my paper. Unfold it and you'll fold back at your dart point. use your fingernail to push that intake inward and start overlapping your dart legs. And I want you to tape it together. I like to tape it inside and outside of the edge of my pattern piece, okay? So you'll see with mine that I'm not super happy with this blend. Let me zoom in. I need to kind of blend this a bit better. There's a bit of a step, all right? So again, we're gonna equalize, we're gonna probably bring this line in a little bit, boost that one out, and just instead of an angle, I want it to be a smooth curve. I might actually use my French curve for this. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so you can blend it with your pencil, and then what you can go and do is cut it with your scissors. And remember, you're cutting with the dart folded, so you get the correct shape of the dart intake. All right, unfold your dart. Look at that beautiful shaping. Okay, so the next step I want you to do is, this is kind of difficult, but we need to make sure that this side of underarm seam walks with this underarm seam, okay? And this is kind of difficult. I'm gonna have you cut out along this one as well. Leave your paper intact above and below it, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. I want you to kind of fold it into thirds. So when this upper part of your underarm seam is sewn, we want to make sure that S is hitting here right at T, or S is hitting here right at this dart leg. And then we want to make sure that this curve is blending smoothly. So you can tape this down or so you can tape that down. I'm really happy with my blend right here, but if there's a step or there's kind of a peak or a valley, we don't want that. So if it kind of comes down to an angle, you want to smooth that out. Just use your French curve and kind of like redraw a smooth curve between those two, okay? And definitely make sure that S is lined up with your dart leg before you do that. So if one side of this is longer or shorter than the other, now's your time to blend that out, okay? All right, now we want to make sure the lower part of our arm, my underarm seam, walks. This is a bit more difficult. The paper doesn't really want to cooperate, but I just line up S with the lower dart leg, and then I start walking these out. Now they are kind of curved a bit, so you have to go little by little. Just make them walk. And then make sure that they're the same length down here, okay? If one of them is longer or shorter, you'll kind of have to adjust. If that's too difficult for you, you can just go and measure from here down to S and make sure it's the same measurement here down to your dart leg. And then you can walk your ruler down this underarm seam and make sure it is the same from your lower dart leg down to W, okay? And if it is, you can cut along your wrist line. Now, what we're gonna do next, you're gonna want your front and your back bodice straps. We are going to walk our front bodice with the front of our sleeve cap, and we're gonna walk the back bodice armhole with the back of our sleeve cap. You'll notice that we already put notches on a single notch on the front armhole and a double notch on the back armhole. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to walk this armhole along here and figure out where our front notch is going to be. And then very similar to what we did in one of our activities in skill 1, you're gonna be walking it all along until you get up to the shoulder here. And you're gonna mark where your bodices hit on your sleeve cap. Now there should be a gap between those notches, and that is the ease that we have in our sleeve cap, okay? So let's do that now. We're gonna take the front side of our sleeve cap and our front bodice. We're going to flip it over and align this corner with this corner. I'm gonna zoom you in so you can see, maybe not that close. There you go. All right, again, align this corner with this one here. And we are just walking our armhole curve along our sleeve cap. So where your two lines start to converge, you will create a pivot point and get them in alignment. Now what I want you to do when you come upon, you can't really see it here, but this is my notch on my front bodice. I'm gonna give myself a little pencil mark, and then I'm gonna keep walking until I get up to my shoulder seam. Give yourself a tick mark up here, okay? Now, I want you to go through and do that like 2 or 3 times. Make sure your notch is landing in the same spot or about the same spot, and this is landing in about the same spot, okay? So go do it again. All right, so you'll see my 2 marks up here. I've done this a few times. My 2 marks are pretty much in the same spot, all right? And that's what we want. If yours are kind of looking like this, you're gonna find the middle ground and just say, that's where my front shoulder hits, okay? So now we're gonna do the same thing with our back armhole on the back part of our sleeve cap, okay? So flip it right sides together. Get this corner and align it with this corner right here and just walk it. Again, we're wanting to make note of where our notches hit on our sleeve cap and then keep going all the way up until you hit the shoulder line. Okay, do that 2 or 3 times. Make sure your lines are kind of in the same general area. Okay, once you've walked your front armhole on the front side of your sleeve cap, you've gotten where your front notch hits and where your front shoulder line hits. You've walked your back armhole on your back sleeve cap and you got your double notch noted and also where your back shoulder line hits. Now, this gap between here, I want you to measure it and make a note of what it is. All right, so for this course, we really want to shoot for 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch ease on our sleeve cap. I find it's really difficult for sewers to set in the sleeve with the amount of ease recommended in the textbook. And so I prefer we shoot for 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch. Page 61 of your textbook talks about how you can kind of solve this problem. So once you have your notches where you want, you're okay with the sleeve cap ease that you have, what I'm gonna recommend you do is right in between your two shoulder marks right here, you're gonna find the middle ground right between them, and you are going to, that is actually going to be your true shoulder notch, right in between those two marks. This notch aligns with the shoulder seam on your bodices. We can go ahead and cut out our sleeve cap. Okay, you cut out your sleeve cap. We're gonna go ahead and notch, mark, and label our sleeve, okay? So we're gonna put our notches on our sleeve cap. Make sure you have a double notch in the back. And your notches should be 1/2 inch apart. You're gonna have a notch up here that aligns with your shoulder, and a single notch here that aligns on your front bodice. You are going to have notches at the ends of your dart legs, and a notch over here that aligns with your dart once this gets sewn together, okay? We're gonna mark our dart with a red circle and a punch hole like we always do our darts. So you can see I actually have a hole there. Circle it in red. Now, this first line that we drafted is actually our grain line. So we can go ahead and add our arrowheads and write grain line. I'm gonna make myself a nice tidy place to label, and I'm gonna go ahead and label my sleeve. All right, so we drafted our sleeve, we made sure we had all of our notches, all of our correct markings, and we have labeled our sleeve. And we also made sure that it fit in with our bodice. So the last thing we have to draft for a basic pattern set is our front and back skirt. So this should be ready to turn in. Good job.